There is a question many still struggle to answer. How did Ukraine, once the world's third largest nuclear power after the United States and Russia, end up in a position where its neighbor felt confident enough to invade? How did a country holding nearly 3,000 nuclear weapons become a nation fighting for survival 3 decades later? Tonight, we examine that transformation, the decisions, the agreements, the assurances, and the failures. Because Ukraine's journey from nuclear inheritance to nuclear vulnerability did not happen overnight. It was the result of political choices, global pressure, and promises that, according to Ukraine, were broken when it mattered most. During the Cold War, the world's third largest nuclear arsenal did not belong to Britain, France, or China. It belonged to Ukraine. When the Soviet Union dissolved in 1991, the newly independent Ukrainian state woke up with nearly 3,000 nuclear weapons on its territory, left behind by Moscow. But decades later, the landscape had changed completely. Ukraine is now free of nuclear weapons and facing a war launched by the very state it once transferred those weapons to. After the full-scale Russian invasion, Ukraine entered one of the most critical periods in its history. And when Vladimir Putin placed his nuclear forces on alert, warning NATO against interference, the fear of nuclear escalation returned to global politics. But to understand today's crisis, we must look back. What exactly happened in those 3 decades? And why did a nuclear giant become so vulnerable? The Ukraine-Russia conflict has reopened several difficult questions. Would nuclear weapons have prevented today's war? Was Ukraine secretly attempting to rebuild its nuclear capability, as Russia alleges? And most importantly, why did Ukraine agree to surrender the world's third largest nuclear arsenal? To find the answers, we return to a pivotal agreement, the Budapest Memorandum. When Ukraine became independent in 1991, it inherited Soviet nuclear weapons, but lacked international recognition and political stability. Global powers feared that nuclear stockpiles scattered across several new states could destabilize Europe. To address this, the Budapest Memorandum was signed in 1994 by the United States, Britain, Russia, and Ukraine. Under this agreement, Ukraine would denuclearize entirely. It would sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and all Soviet-era nuclear weapons on its soil would be transferred to Moscow. In return, Ukraine received promises, clear commitments from Russia, the United States, and Britain: respect for Ukraine's independence and sovereignty, respect for its geographical borders, a guarantee of protection from aggression. At the time, Ukraine was struggling to solidify itself as a new nation. The memorandum provided recognition, stability, and security assurances that Kyiv believed would protect it from future threats. By 1996, every remaining nuclear warhead had been transferred to Russia. Belarus and Kazakhstan made similar decisions under the same framework. Ukraine stepped into the future without weapons and with promises instead. Ukraine argues that Russia violated the Budapest Memorandum for the first time in 2014, when it seized Crimea. Crimea housed the critical naval base at Sevastopol and the Russian Black Sea Fleet. Soon after, separatist movements in Donetsk and Luhansk, supported by Moscow, triggered a conflict that has already taken more than 14,000 lives. When the threat of a full invasion increased in early 2022, President Volodymyr Zelensky again demanded that the Budapest Memorandum be honored. But events moved too fast. On February 24, 2022, Russian forces launched a full-scale attack. Air bases, defense installations, and key infrastructure were struck. Russian troops advanced from multiple directions. And then, Putin used Zelensky's own words as justification. He accused Ukraine of preparing to break the memorandum by allegedly attempting to acquire nuclear weapons with American assistance. According to Putin, this created an urgent threat to Russian citizens. But nuclear safety experts disagreed. Alexander Lenoska, an authority on nuclear security, stated, "Putin's claims are completely wrong. The United States has no interest in arming Ukraine or helping it become a nuclear power." Zelensky had only argued that Ukraine surrendered the world's third largest nuclear arsenal in exchange for security, and now had neither weapons nor security. He noted that Ukraine attempted 3 times to consult the signatories of the memorandum without success. His 4th attempt came just before the invasion, calling it the last time. Long before the memorandum was signed, some Ukrainian leaders predicted that the agreement might someday be violated. In 1992, former military commander Volodymyr Tolubko warned Parliament that giving up all nuclear weapons in exchange for security guarantees was romantic and premature. He argued that Ukraine should keep at least a portion of its Soviet warheads, an insurance policy against future aggression. At the time, his concerns were dismissed. Today, they are revisited in almost every debate about the war. The invasion has revived an old question. If Ukraine had kept nuclear weapons, would Russia have attacked? Many Ukrainian officials and analysts believe nuclear deterrence could have stopped the invasion. Ferraro Jr., an expert on Asian geopolitics, explains that many nations view nuclear weapons as effective in preventing foreign attacks, not because they intend to use them, but because their mere presence deters aggression. They point to the Cold War. Despite extreme tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union, both sides avoided direct conflict. But experts also warn that nuclear weapons bring their own dangers. Conflicts between nuclear-armed states such as India and Pakistan remain highly volatile. In other words, deterrence works until it doesn't. The reality: Ukraine never controlled the weapons. A critical fact often overlooked: Ukraine never had operational control over the nuclear weapons on its territory. Alexander Lenoshka explains, Ukraine did not possess launch codes. It did not control the command systems. It did not have the infrastructure to operate the weapons independently. The warheads were physically present, but Ukraine could not use them. Andrew Footer, a professor of international politics, adds that converting Ukraine's nuclear energy industry into a weapons program would have required enormous political and financial investment. In the 1990s, this was simply beyond reach. Is there a real risk of nuclear confrontation today? Even though Ukraine no longer has nuclear weapons, Russia's invasion has reignited fears of nuclear confrontation in Europe. Putin warned that any NATO intervention would provoke a severe response. He placed Russia's nuclear forces on special alert. He accused Western governments of taking aggressive actions and imposing unjust sanctions. But nuclear experts stress an alert status does not mean an intention to use nuclear weapons. At the time, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg confirmed, no NATO troops are in Ukraine. There are no plans to send troops. Putin's nuclear rhetoric is dangerous and irresponsible. The United States and the European Union expressed similar positions. Military intervention remains an option only if a NATO member state is attacked under Article 5. Putin responded by warning that any action against Russia would be met with a strong response. According to Lenoshka, Putin's statements carry a veiled nuclear threat, but nothing more. He notes, if nuclear weapons were used at this point, it would be very surprising. Ferraro Jr. argues that even if Russia threatened NATO states like Estonia, Latvia, or Lithuania, both sides would likely try to avoid escalation. And according to Footer, there is no reason for Moscow to use nuclear weapons on Ukraine. Radioactive fallout could affect Russia itself. Destroying Ukraine would undermine Russia's goal of expanding influence there. Ukraine holds immense strategic and economic value. Laurely Piccoli, an expert on Russian defense strategy, states that Putin's heightened alert appears aimed at pressuring Ukraine during negotiations, not preparing for a nuclear strike. So the question remains, how did Ukraine travel from nuclear strength to a state of extreme vulnerability? Part of the answer lies in the promises it accepted. Part lies in the risks it chose to avoid. And part lies in the geopolitical realities that emerged when those promises were not upheld. Ukraine believed denuclearization would bring security. Instead, it found itself facing the very threat it thought the world had guaranteed it would never face. Yet even now, experts insist that nuclear weapons are not a simple solution. They deter, but they also endanger. They prevent wars, but they can also ignite them. Ukraine's story is a reminder that nuclear peace is fragile, and the lessons from this conflict will shape global security debates for years to come. Thank you for watching. This is USMag.